Okay, and we are streaming.
Awesome.
Yes, well, thank you so much for taking the time. Like I said before, we are getting started now. As you know, this is a part of the Kendnall Moore Show. You're actually our first guest for our speaker series. Um, so that's
Honored. Honored.
it's
Thank
really
you
nice.
so much for having me.
Of course. And were you able to look over the questions that we that I sent over?
Yeah, no, I'm all set.
Okay, great. I just want
I've had to give some of them a lot of good thought. They were great questions. They
that's
weren't the
good.
run-of-the-mill questions that I often get, so that was refreshing.
Oh, that's good. I went off of based off of what I was able to find about you. Um, but we can get started. So my name is, Isaiah. I am the lead videographer and co-host with the Kendall Moore Show. I'm here in Chicago. Just a little bit about me. I'm a senior at Columbia College Chicago. I study television and cultural studies. I've done work with the Student Diversity and Inclusion Office. I've worked with the Student Organization Council. I was the co-president of Black Student Union, and like a community activist here in Chicago. I'm originally from New Jersey, East Orange, and I
All right.
came here about 4 years ago to to move away. But that's enough about me.
Yeah.
Um,
No, I love that. I love that. I am very familiar with the Newark area of New Jersey, given the work of Braven. So I've become a big fan of your neck of the woods. So I'm so excited to spend time with you. Clearly, just from talking a little bit about yourself, you are on the right track to a really promising future. So I always love spending time talking to the future leaders of the country.
Thank you. Thank you. So just so we can get to know a little bit about you, first question, pretty basic, so where are you originally from?
Yeah. So I was born actually in Englewood on the south side, and then I spent many years in South Shore as well as a young person. My family has deep south side roots. My mom was from a family of 9 children. There are 28 first cousins that I have on her side of the family alone. We went to China. It was very fun family to grow up in. Lots of cousins running around all the time. And we have been lifelong members of St. Mark United Methodist Church, which is in Chatham, so also on the south side. And then I spent my high school years at Homewood Flossmoor out in the far south suburbs. So pretty much I was a complete South Sider until I went off to college on the East Coast in Massachusetts, and then post-college spent a number of years in New Orleans, Louisiana, which is where my husband is from. Fell in love with that city. And now my husband and I are raising our children probably about 5 blocks away from the west side in Oak Park.
Oh, that's so nice to hear. I'm familiar with all the places you just said, even though I've only been in Chicago for a little bit. Like Flossmoor, South Suburbs, South Shore, Englewood, all those places I'm very familiar with. I spent some time there because of the connections I've made here. So it's really, really nice to hear. So speaking of college that you just touched upon, just elaborate a little bit more. Like, what did you study in college, and where did you go?
Yeah. So I ended up going to Mount Holyoke College, which is a small women's college in South Hadley, Massachusetts. It's about an hour west of Boston. I really wanted at that point in my life to have I would call it a reset, because I definitely, having come from the south side of the city and then going into the south suburbs, at that point in time, there were not a lot of Black families. And so it was just really quite an adjustment for me to the high school space of an all-white high school where most of the Black kids were completely undermatched in terms of the kind of classes they were in and all of that. And so I felt pretty lonely in that school situation, even though I had lots of good friends. But from an academic standpoint, it was just clear that Black kids weren't thought to be smart. And so I was just trying to find my way. And so I decided that I really wanted to go to college up small, that I felt like would nurture my leadership in general as a woman, and then also as a Black woman. and had a member of my church actually had been a student at Mount Holyoke, and our moms were friends. And so that's how I discovered Mount Holyoke. And when I went to visit, it was and still is a very diverse school. I was struck by the diversity, not only from the United States, but from across the globe, but just the women empowerment message. And also it was a place that was going to push you and stress you hard to be your best self as a leader, but also was kind. And I was looking for that kind of an environment. And I loved my time at Mount Holyoke. And I minored in politics and I majored in history, and just was very involved in campus life, was a all president, and then I studied abroad. It just opened up my horizons in various different ways. And honestly, being able to spend a lot of time, and again, from the part of the country that you're from on the East Coast, I just think it was really important for me, having been really, like I said, a South Sider, living mainly South in the city, actually only South in the city, growing up, to just have a new place to live for a long period of time and get to know a different group of people. And I really did find my best self, I would say, in that environment. And after Mount Holyoke, I decided to really consider how I was going to pay it forward, or actually it was when I was still there. I started to give a lot of thought, honestly, because of my history classes and my politics classes, and a professor there named Preston Smith, who's had been doing a lot of research on Chicago, actually. And I was a research assistant for him one summer on a book that he was writing on the housing projects in Chicago. Robert Taylor Homes was the main focus. And it just, I think, really reiterated for me how my story in some ways was very similar to other young people growing up on the South Side, but had taken some different turns. And so as I was finalizing my time at Mount Holyoke, I was trying to figure out what I was going to do to pay it back to the Black community. And so I ended up becoming a teacher through Teach for America.
Yes, that was really interesting to hear about. Where did you study abroad?
I'm sorry, I just missed that question. You broke up a little.
Where did you study abroad at?
Within my teaching time in?
Yes.
Yeah. So I actually really was trying to figure out how to pay it forward. I really wanted to come home, but Teach for America was not here at the time. So I also thought about my other opportunities were looking at the Peace Corps, really considering that. I just didn't want to go international at that time. I also considered Special Olympics. Had I done Special Olympics, I would have come back to Chicago. I have a very special place in my heart for Special Olympics and young people and people in general who have different abilities and unique abilities. So I had an aunt who was of hearing. She was considered deaf. So I was really thinking about that opportunity as well. And I'd done a lot in high school, actually, with students at home at Flossmoor who were not in traditional classroom settings given their special needs. So that said, when I got into Teach for America, I had some friends ahead of me at Mount Holyoke, African-American women who had decided to teach through Teach for America, and I went to visit their classrooms, one in particular in Houston, Texas, my friend Angela Lamont Flowers. And I just was struck by the impact she was having on her Black students in Houston. And so I decided that Teach for America was the right fit for me, even though I couldn't come home. And I ended up in New Orleans teaching sixth grade social studies and language arts to an incredible group of students and their families. I just absolutely adored them. Just thought those students could reach the stars and the moon for sure. And they reminded me a lot of myself and other people I grew up around, especially in my earlier years, and just the potential that they had. However, I was very aware that because they were Black, there were some barriers that they were going to come up against that were going to not likely allow them entry into places like schools and stronger schools that they had really earned the right to without knowing how to navigate the system. So I ended up spending 7 years in New Orleans. 2 of those years was teaching full time, but then the other remainder of the time I always taught And I ran a program for students who were just super, super brilliant, mainly Black, and really trying to help them get on a path to college. And it really changed my whole outlook on education as well, getting to see not only the classroom side of things, but what a really high quality academic enrichment program could do for young people. And so I spent 7 years in New Orleans before I finally was like, I think I should stop vacation in Chicago in December. So I came back home and started to work full time for Teach for America.
And with that experience from Teach for America, how did that lead you to become, the founder of Braven?
Yeah. So I am a stayer, is what I like to say. I spent, like I said, 7 years in New Orleans, which at the time was a very long time for a Teach for America teacher and then an alum of Teach for America before Hurricane Katrina, building this organization that I had to work in. It was called Summer Bridge at the time. Now it's called Breakthrough. But really what made me stay was my dedication to my students and their families and their unbridled potential. I mean, I just was like, these young people can truly reach the stars and the moon. And so I ended up getting to know some folks on the staff side of Teach for America. So even though I came to the organization as a teacher and was an alum, I actually had never worked for the organization. And honestly, as a core member, which means that those are my teaching years, I didn't think Teach for America was as diverse as it could be, especially in terms of people who shared the racial and income backgrounds of our students. In my teaching corps in New Orleans, there were a few of us who were identified as Black or African American, and it bothered me because I felt like there was sometimes a lack of understanding of the communities in which we were teaching. And so I moved back to Chicago, and I'm now working actually for the national organization of Breakthrough. And I go to a Teach for America alumni roundtable with the founder of Teach for America, a woman named Wendy Kopp. And we get in this whole conversation around the mission of TFA and the 2-year commitments. And it gets to me, and I just said, I don't know why we're even talking about this. I believe that Teach for America, the commitment that you make as a core member and then as an alum, there's a commitment of a lifetime where you're really trying to ensure that all children, regardless of income, background, and race, have a really equitable chance and the opportunity at a high quality education. And so Wendy, after that session concluded, comes over to me and says, why have you never worked for Teach for America? I don't get it. Why have you never come on our staff? And I was very transparent with her and said, I didn't have the best experience as a Black core member. I just didn't. Right. And I told her why, and that led us into a series of conversations where she offered me a role working directly for her. And I did know by that point in time, Teach for America had become an incredible organization from a business side of a nonprofit, and to work with her directly. And she was like, you got to come and help us, really become our better selves in this area. So I ended up spending 13 years at Teach for America on the senior team, running regional operations, new site development at one point. Then for 8 of the 13 years, I ran the human capital work, the human asset team there, as well as diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And then towards the end of my time there, public affairs. And at the same moment that I was going through this journey on the professional side of Teach for America, those 6th graders that I mentioned early on were college students. And they were beginning to come out of college, and a couple of them were starting to say, I think I want to do Teach for America as my next step. And I was like, oh my God, that's so exciting. It's like a teacher's dream is for their students to say they want to walk in their path. And so one of my favorite students was a senior at Northwestern University up in Evanston. And she started to say, I think I might want to do Teach for America. And this was the year of Hurricane Katrina. And so I'm watching her and so many of my other students in one of the absolute worst moments of their lives, of a city's life. I mean, everything went underwater, and, the CNN and other news channels, I mean, the coverage was just like the pandemic coverage, or just like what we've seen this summer. The inequities in our country were just absolutely laid bare on TV for everyone to see. My husband's from New Orleans. Our entire family ended up coming up to Chicago to live with us that year. We had just gotten married 3 months before Katrina, so we had 14 folks up here. So that was a great way to start a marriage.
Wow.
Honestly, it really was. It really was, because you just quickly get over, like, whether the toothpaste is being rolled out the tube correctly, as you're dealing with much bigger issues. And that said, my students, I just absolutely believed, even with that, facing that kind of an obstacle, should be able to come out and earn really strong livings, because they were going to have bachelor's degrees. And one of my favorite recruiters walks in my office and says, "Hey, I met this student and she's amazing, but she's not going to get into Teach for America." And you could have blown me over with a feather. I was like, I don't even understand. She's been at it for 10 years, doing everything right, as has her mom, for 10 years that I've known her, and really 20 years if you back it up, in terms of what her and her mom have been doing. Like, how is this possible? And it made me take a really deep look at higher ed, and how the support students either have or don't have at this very critical moment of getting a job,
Right.
especially if they're first in their families go to college on the Pell Grant. And that's how Braven started. I wrote a paper for the Aspen Institute, which is supposed to be a paper about the lost talent of the country, that I'd been seeing, because there were 50,000 young people applying every year to the teaching court, Teach for America. There were another 30,000 people applying to our staff. You have a pipeline of 80,000 coming in every year for 8 years. You get some enormous pattern recognition when you're starting to look at the patterns that you and people in the process that you have a real affinity towards. And for me, that was Black students, and students on Pell Grants, or Latinx students. And we were seeing large numbers of that group of young people not really being successful in our selection process. There was a lot Teach for America needed to do, and did do, and will continue to do, to reduce bias in the model. But what I knew by that point in time, because of the other employers I was talking to all the time, was that if this student didn't have a shot, or looked like she didn't have a shot at TFA, she was not going to have a shot at the roles that go into investment banks or into corporations, and rotational role, like all the roles that would absolutely break her into the American middle class that she had deserved. And so Braven started out as this pilot, 17 students actually at San Jose State, going through this process of getting ready for a job. And I can talk more about Braven, but that's really the origination of it.
That sounds like it sounds like Teach for America is heading in the right direction, thanks to like the work that you've been doing, and like the challenges that you've presented to them over the years, and like holding them accountable for what they should be doing and making themselves better. That's really admirable. I really enjoyed hearing that. I actually found you through the Obama Foundation website, because that's where I was like looking for potential folks to interview, and also because I have a connection with the Obama Foundation. When I first came to Chicago, I had went to their training day that they had, like the first one they ever had or something like that. I was in like that inaugural class or stuff like that. So like we spent the whole day, just brainstorming ideas how to make certain things better here in Chicago and around the world and stuff like that. And then, even, Barack Obama even stopped by and talked to us a little bit, and went over some of those ideas that we were thinking about all day. Like we were there from 8 to like 12-hour days, a 12-hour day.
Amazing.
So that's how I kind of found you. And I was like, that's kind of the connection I had to like figuring out who I wanted to interview. But you're a little bit ahead of me in terms of like your recognition with the foundation and things like that, and the work you've done. So like, what does it mean to you to be a part of that Obama Foundation fellowship?
Yeah, it was clearly one of the big honors of my lifetime. And it has everything to do with the work that I've done in building Braven alongside an incredible team of people who are diverse. In Chicago, we like to call ourselves the Cross-City Classic, or the Crosstown Classic. Lots of us are Sox fans. A lot of us are Cubs fans. I'm a Sox fan. But it's a very diverse group of people who've come together to build a model that works directly with higher education institutions. So in the city of Chicago, National Louis University, or with high-performing college access organizations or high-performing charter school organizations. to help students who are first in their families to go to college on the Pell Grant come out with strong jobs and earn the full dollar instead of 66 cents on the dollar. And what that means is that students take the Braven course as sophomores in college, and it's really rigorous. And basically 80% of it is online. They learn about resumes and cover letters, and there are 5 big competencies: working in teams, operating and managing, networking, communicating for the work, as well as making sure that students know how to use data to solve a problem. And then finally, a bucket of skills that's around self-driven leading or asset-based leadership development, which really means who are you and why are you incredible, and how you need to protect yourself against stereotype threat, because you're going to enter these spaces where you might be the only, especially in the professional workforce, and you might start psyching yourself out, given what you've seen around you. And so we want to make sure that you have put on your armor to really be able to withstand that. And so in terms of the work of Braven, we had caught the interest of the foundation and people at the foundation, and because we were working directly within higher education systems, and also the coaches who coach the teams of 5 to 8 Braven students actually come from various different companies and employers, and they are often professionals who are looking to really make an impact in their communities on how to lead and manage diverse teams. And they really are trying to not only advance their own skills, but also make sure that their companies see a set of talent that they might otherwise not see. And so it's been incredible to build out Braven. And then, the Obama Fellowship opens up nominations, and I'm kind of like, I don't think we'll get this. I don't think this would happen. And we applied the first time the fellowship opening, and we didn't get it. It didn't happen. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense. And then they opened up again and sent us an email and said, you guys should consider applying. I'm sure that went out, and it did go out to thousands of other people. And I kind of said to my team, like, I don't know. I don't know if this is a get used to time. I don't know if we'll get it. And they were like, no, we got to try again. And we did, and we got it. And it was a huge honor, but in talking to them, because you do then stop at the very beginning of that and say, why? And they're like, you know what? You all are doing what we really believe is important. You're figuring out how to work within systems to make them better. And on the employer side, as well as on the college side, you also have a diverse group of people, a diverse coalition coming together to solve a problem. And you were saying, hey, this is a problem that can be solved. This group of young people should not come out and earn 66 cents on the dollar to their higher income peers. They can earn the full dollar if we all come together as Americans and really do what we do at our best in terms of our ideals, which is open the doors of opportunity to everyone. And so I was honored to become an Obama Fellow. I was honored to know that I fit the values, and Braven fit the values of what they were looking for. And now it's such an honor to be alongside 19 other incredible humans from across the globe, trying to fix problems that we've created that need to be fixed.
Right. Yeah, I can only imagine the huge honor you must have felt when you were accepted the second time around and participated in that. But thank you for sharing so much about you. I mean, the work you've done is just incredible, and incredible is kind of an understatement. But as we got to know you a little bit, I wanted to move into kind of the next portion of our interview surrounding voting and activism. So first question would be what are your general, broad scale first thoughts view of voting and its current process?
Yeah. Without a doubt, voting is one of the most influential tools we have to create systemic change, period, end of sentence. The other night, one of my daughters, I have 3 children, basically was like, what's the point? What's the point? It seems like everything is just not going well. And I was like, what do you mean? This is it. This is the biggest lever. We must vote. And we've seen that over time, because when you vote, you can change policy. And it's just so important for people, especially our young people, like the Braven Fellows who are in college, and some of them are just, reaching the age of 18 and being able to vote, to have a voice. I really do believe that you should not complain if you don't vote. Like, the only way we can make things different, at least when it comes to policy, is to have people in office who really are going to champion the policies that we believe in. And it allows us to really elect leaders whose values and vision align with ours. And so I just think it is absolutely so critical. And I would say, I think in the last year, and honestly, even before that, it's been very obvious, I think, to many people, why voting is just completely a critical thing we must do. And as an African American, you know, I have on our kitchen wall, we have some very important pictures from Black history of Ruby Bridges integrating the New Orleans public schools, with people throwing tomatoes at her and saying curse words at her as a very little child. Also, you know, Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman, you know, Fannie Lou Hamer. I mean, these people absolutely, and many, 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 many others whose names are not as well known, who lost their lives or spent their entire lives making it possible for Black people to vote. So I just believe it's critical.
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of one of the other questions I'm about to ask you too, is like, I mean, a lot of folks have lost hope in voting, especially like younger folks, because they just feel as if, you know, things haven't really changed or changed at all. So what do you say to like folks like who say that voting is hopeless or they've lost hope in it? Or says it doesn't matter? What would you say to them? Like, what can you say to like convince them, like, you know, it matters and it's something that you should exercise as a power that you have as a person?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, just looking at all the different voting rights acts that have passed, or things that have changed as a result of people deciding to vote and really put people in office who cared about their issues. You know, don't get me wrong, like, we have been in some really tough moments lately where it is sometimes very hard to find hope.
Right.
But if you just look at history and the history of our people, I mean, we are a group of people who absolutely has overcome so many other obstacles, including not being able to go to school alongside white people. So in 1954, Brown versus Board, you know, really led to massive changes in terms of education. Well, that just would not have happened without people going out and voting for leaders that would pass that law. And I'm really worried about situations that we're looking at now of voter suppression with Black and brown communities. You know, one of the most sinister forms of minority voter oppression is making people wait longer to vote, or scaring people off from voting, or making people think that voting is not important and is not going to move things forward. And, you know, in the 2016 election, researchers aggregated smartphone user data to see how long voters would, you know, spend time waiting in line to cast their ballot. And they found that those who tried to vote in Black neighborhoods, it was significantly longer than those who tried to vote in white neighborhoods. And so I always, when people are saying, is it worth it? Should I do it? That there's a healthy sense of skepticism when that little thought starts to emerge and then becomes a big thought, and then people might not take action, that is exactly what people want you to do. Like, that is exactly what people are hoping for you to do, is to not exercise your right. And voters heavily in Black communities were 74% more likely to wait for at least 30 minutes in order to vote, which is just crazy. But I think, you know, there's just a lot of things that happen that I do think make young Black people and Black people in general and Black and brown communities just really feel like it's not worth it. But that is all trying to get folks not out to vote, because if we went out to vote in mass, there's just no way that folks who didn't represent the interests that we care most about would win. You know, wealthier voters can easily, you know, figure out how to spend a lot of time waiting in line, whereas, you know, people who have tight timelines, need to get to a job, often, you know, are on shifts and shift working, like happened in our community. They just have less time to like sit around trying to vote. And we just have to fight against that. it really is the worst of both worlds. Voters who can afford the least to wait in line and wait in long lines are those who end up paying for it the most. And so we just got to figure out how to get it done, mail it in, figure out how to go early, just say, look, I am going to go ahead and take this chunk of time to wait. But, my big thing is that our ancestors lost their lives for us to have this opportunity to vote, and we have to exercise it.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's interesting because I'm of the age where I can now well, this is my first presidential election is what I'm trying to say. And voting. So a lot of people like in my generation, around my age group, we've seen so much unfold in the last 10 years, particularly with like Black Lives Matter. And we've seen countless verdicts come back, or rulings, or lack of charges, or dismissal of cases. Every time someone that's Black is murdered by the police, and then a different intersection of their identities kind of like make up the reason why they're probably highlighted in the media or why they're not. And that's honestly, it's been hard to overcome that kind of thing as we like vote and move to vote. It's kind of hard when someone when someone is is killed or brutalized, and the first thing people say is to vote. Sometimes it's hard to hear, but like once you analyze the situation and realize that like your voting power is what elects officials that will better represent you, and if they're not representing you, you vote them out. And basically moving the country in a way that people want to see, as opposed to having human rights and basic rights kind of stripped from us and things like that. So with that, another question, without like necessarily endorsing a specific candidate, unless you would want to, how do you feel about the energy surrounding, the current presidential candidates, and how that election is going to probably fare out in the next couple of months?
Yeah, well, I have to make sure that I'm stating really clearly that these are my personal opinions. Braven is a 501c3 nonpartisan organization. But I am a human being who has grown up as a Black person in America, and I will absolutely exercise my right to vote. And so that said, we're at a historic crossroads. We just are. The last year has, as you just said, magnified. Truly magnified the long history of systemic racism, ongoing inequality and inequities and injustices towards Black Americans. And this has been the unfortunate history of our people here. And one thing I do think, as I'm, just monitoring everything in terms of this presidential election, across lines of differences, I do think we are beginning to see white people in particular, and I would say young white people, which gives me a lot of hope, really begin to say, this is not okay. This is not okay. Unfortunately, I do think it took cell phone footage that was undeniable, that people could see, because it's not like this hadn't been going on for long periods of time, but I think it was hard to believe, or for some people to believe, let me put it like that. And I think if you're Black in America, you knew it. You knew people who were in your family or in your friendship group who had been not treated fairly by law or law enforcement. And across lines of difference, we are just seeing the devastating impact of the pandemic on the health and wealth of our most vulnerable communities and citizens. These people and their families and communities absolutely deserve a more just America. In every way. With the pandemic, with all that has been done and all that needs to continue to happen in healthcare, that we have seen it's just like Hurricane Katrina. It laid bare the inequities still in our communities. And even, there's been lots of talk on the South Side about hospitals and the closing of hospitals, and I get it, like you have to be efficient and consolidate, et cetera. But we've got to have a strong access to healthcare. Is that as those kinds of decisions are being made, it's just so important to realize that some of those decisions really do depend on who is sitting at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue and what their beliefs are. And we need to ensure that our nation really lives up to its foundational promise of creating equal opportunity for all, the future of our country along with its future leaders, and just people in general, especially in the Black and brown communities, really depends on it. And so, you know, there's a lot of energy, I would say, going around this election. I'm not going to say it's always the most positive energy, but I'm really hoping, and I would say in my case, praying that we come out on the other side with a stronger, more hopeful situation, because it's just really been devastating, and it does feel like we've gone backwards in ways in which we should have been going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that kind of thing. I mean, I feel like this election is kind of us voting for someone that is receptive to the pushback of the people and like the changes that we want to see. I just personally feel like, you know, the current president just isn't like, I mean, his views is his views and what he does is what he does. But like when people are upset and they protest and they're out in these streets risking their lives and they're continuously fighting for something, and there's just kind of just falling on, you know, hard-headed folks in that position, it's kind of frustrating. It's like, well, you know, you believe this, but the rest of the country is like, no, we have to do something else, and you don't like adjust to that or adapt to that. And I think that's what kind of, among many things, makes that a not good leader. To be able to listen to the people that you're, you know, supposedly, you know, tasked with leading, and not being able to take that kind of criticism, critique, or, you know, kind of way in which they want to change things. So I think that's kind of what this election is about. It's kind of like putting someone in the office that can, you know, they have their views as well, and it may not necessarily be mine, but once we all come together and we're like, hey, this has to change, they'll be like, all right, well, we have to do something about this for the benefit of, you know, everyone. So yeah.
Without a doubt. I mean, I just feel like we need to all vote for decency. We need to vote for decency.
Yeah, you see,
yeah.
we kind of taken the bare minimum for granted a little bit, because you're like, you know, the bare minimum is like, you know, a president comes in, they're Republican, they're Democrat, whatever. They have their views and they have their issues or whatever, and they have their controversies or, you know, but at the very least they were, you know, they upheld the position in a way that kind of, you know, were reflective of what they believed in and reflected America like, all right, this is a steadfast country, this is a strong enough country to like take them seriously. But now it's just like, it's like just a joke now. So now it's like, that's what it's kind of like fighting for too. I mean, people have felt like they had to settle for, you know, Joe Biden and stuff like that, because, you know, what Obama brought to the country, and then like having to go like to regress from that and then to get back to where we were when Obama came is kind of, it's hard to wrap your head around, because you're like, Obama laid the foundation for a lot of good stuff, a lot of hope, and we want to build off of that and make things better, but we kind of, that didn't happen. So here we are now.
Yeah. Here we are now. So all I have to say is give vote for decency. You know, I was talking to someone recently, you know, it's like no one's perfect, but I'm like, all you have to do is consider the alternative. What's the alternative? And then wrap your head around what you need to do to exercise your right and to honestly lift your voice. And it's super important. I mean, when you look at all of the awfulness that we have seen just play out again and again and again with Black people at the hands of law enforcement, when you dig in and you see why there are not the charges that should come unequivocally, it goes into the world of policy very quickly. What are the policies that are in place? And without the right elected officials, then policy does not change. And it's just like when, you know, way back in the day, you know, Black people were not considered a full human being. We were considered 2/3 of a man. You know, like it took policy to change that. No, we're all created equal and we all have the right to vote, and, you know, et cetera. Same way with women. And that came through policy. And so that's where it's like, yes, you know, it's a long road. But like Martin Luther King said, the arc of the moral universe bends towards justice. Well, we've got to just keep bending it, and voting and getting the right folks in office is critical.
Absolutely. Those are all the questions that I have. Is there anything else that you would like to add or to share?
I just would say, especially given who you are, I mean, it's so incredible to talk with you.
Oh, thank you so much.
It's just like I said, I'm a former teacher, I'm a talent nerd, and one thing I say often to my children's teachers is just like, what an unbelievable honor and a privilege it is to talk to the future every day as a teacher. And in your case, I just feel like I'm talking to the future, and I just want you and other people to understand that things do change and things can get better. And we do have the ability to create change, and change never comes easy. It just doesn't. And, it's this very hard moment in time that's linked to 400 years of systematic oppression. But, we do get to go eat where we want to eat and drink at the same water fountains when it's not, a pandemic. Like we have rights that we did not have at one point in time. And that was because our ancestors fought for those rights and voted and did all the things. And now that's what we need to do and what we need your generation to do for the next generation. So I just look at it as, this is what we do as a people. We make it better for those who come after us, and one day we'll be the ancestors. So thank you so much for letting me spend time with you.
Thank you. I agree with passing it on as well. You always want to pass things on, make things better for the people that's going to come after you. I think that's crucially important. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
It was great talking to you, but that's all I have for today.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for having me. Take care. Stay well.
Of course, you too. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.